Hey, what's up people, it's TTC, and today we're going to be having a look at my 3 3/4 Clone Wars Jedi figures. These would have come out sort of around the same time as the animated show, so about 2007 to about 2013-ish. I never actually owned any of them at the time. If you know anything about me from my channel by now, it's that I'm mostly a 6-inch collector. But maybe about a year ago, I was on my probably 30th rewatch of the Clone Wars, and I decided, yep, I definitely need to start myself a little Clone Wars collection. For me though, trying to get that done in 6-inch Black Series scale is just absolutely not doable. Trying to army build all those clones would not only take up absolutely tons of space, but it would have cost me an absolute fortune. And then once you start buying the Jedi and all the droids and everything, just the money piles up and just not doable for me. So I just decided to dip my toe into some 3 3/4 figures, and you know what? I'm actually really enjoying it. Some of these are pretty damn cool. I won't lie, I still think 6-inch figures are much better, but this has been a fun line to collect, especially with all the different ships and vehicles and playsets and whatever. I do have the 6-inch Black Series TIE Fighter, but that thing is so absolutely massive that it just has to sit on its own. I can't fit it anywhere else. Whereas all the ships and vehicles and whatever from this line all sit together really nicely on top of my display, and I can also pose some of the figures with it whenever I feel like it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get them all down and we'll have a look at each figure one by one. So let's crack on. So we'll start off first with my most recent acquisition, and that is Plo Koon. As you can see, this is obviously him in his cold weather snow gear. Pretty sure he did actually wear this in one of the episodes, but I know this look more from that comic arc where he was fighting with the devil dogs on whatever snowy planet that was. Again, man, I need to do some research before I start filming these videos. But either way, I think this is a really cool look for him. The normal figure, just in his sort of regular Jedi robes, isn't bad either, but it's sort of pre-posed in like a really wide leg stance, so I think I actually just prefer this one in general. That thick overcoat and then the clone armor pieces, it all just adds up to quite a cool look in my opinion. Especially when you get down here to the legs, where it sort of looks like he's wearing clone boots and knee pads, and then he's just got these wraps wrapped around them. I just think that's a really sick looking design choice. So I know he was supposed to come with what looks like a little set of snowshoes, and then a different mask for his face. I don't particularly miss them, to be honest. I bought this guy second hand, and I'm happy with him just as he is. Getting a look at this face sculpt though, and have a look at that. This is top notch this. At this time they were doing really good jobs of these animated face sculpts. I look at all that little detail in there and everything. I honestly think this actually looks better than the live action version of his face. Obviously like this, you don't have to worry about fitting an actor's head underneath this giant weird wiggly mask. So it gives you more room for like these little details on the top of his head and everything. It's just such a cool design, isn't it? Now, it does come with his blue lightsaber, but I'm going to say here, buying this guy secondhand, I'm pretty sure this is not his lightsaber. It's just one of those generic blue ones that you seem to find everywhere. Being more of a secondary character, it's not a big deal for me. As long as he has a lightsaber and it's the right colour, I'm happy enough, I suppose. I can let it slide in a way that I probably wouldn't do with any of the more important characters. There he is with his clone commander Wolf, and I think that these two look really cool together. I might be slightly biased anyway because I just absolutely love this Wolf figure. They did such a damn good job of making that look cool with all these little details at such a tiny scale. So having these two standing next to each other and them both being quite detailed, damn cool if you ask me. And then, just sort of sticking with the trend of quite cool but less important characters, here we've got Kit Fisto. He's another one where I think the animated design is just spot on. It makes him look so much cooler than the live action version. And let's face it, the character's just pretty damn cool anyway. Anyone who tells you that they don't like Kit Fisto is a liar. Looking at him top to bottom, I guess he is just wearing your generic Jedi robes or whatever, but the design looks really cool there, especially those tentacles on the back of his head. They're really nicely painted too. They could have just done a really simple paint job on that considering it's supposed to be the animated version. But nah, I actually really like how it looks. Have a look at that face sculpt too. Really, he's just got two big black eyes and a little smirk, but there's so much character and attitude just right there in that tiny little face sculpt. And again, it all flows into these tentacles on the back of the head, which I honestly don't think they could have done a better job of this if they tried. But if we take this head off here for a sec, you'll see the slight problem that mine has If you have a look at it straight on, for some reason he's got 2 right shoulders. It's obviously just a factory error or whatever, but he ends up with this sort of ball on the outside of the shoulder that should be right there inside the armpit to help with the articulation. You can obviously just swivel it around and have it facing the right way, but then he's got this big cutout on the front that should be on the back for the elbow. It's a tiny thing, but man, that annoys me. Again, pretty sure this is not his lightsaber, it just looks like the same generic one that the blue one was, but cast in green. I'm not too fussed when it comes to this one either, as long as he's got a green lightsaber, then there you go. He looks cool holding it. He holds it nicely enough, and it's not going to fall out of his hands. Overall, not one of my favourite characters, but yeah, definitely actually pretty happy with this one. And on to the big man himself, we've got Anakin Skywalker in his first look that he had in sort of Season 1 and 2, maybe a bit of Season 3 as well. This is one of the earlier figures from this line, so you can kind of tell. It's a bit of a softer sculpt and the articulation's just slightly different. But I can deal with that because I'd much rather have this look of him. I know there are probably better figures of his later looks, but to me, the later looks are just as Revenge of the Sith with 2 gloves. It's kind of boring. I much prefer him like this, with that sort of clone armour that kind of looks like Vader. So this is definitely my preference. Might have just faded a little bit here, but if you look really closely, you can see he's got the Jedi symbol just printed on his shoulder armour there. That's a nice little touch. Now the thing is with this one, and the Obi-Wan coming up later on as well, there was a lot of Chinese fake knockoffs just sort of getting about on eBay or whatever. And I know I bought this guy second hand, so I can't actually guarantee that he's not one. I wouldn't usually buy a knockoff, but in this case, it looks exactly like what it's meant to be, and I can't really tell either way, so as far as I'm concerned, not really a big deal. Having a look at his face sculpt, and again, yeah, like I said earlier, it is a bit of a softer sculpt, but you can definitely see it there. I mean, it's not like you're going to have any problem knowing who this is, it's pretty clearly Anakin. The hair's nicely done, but maybe just a bit of a slightly darker brown than it should be. I know he wasn't completely blonde, but maybe just a little bit lighter, a little bit more yellow than this would have been better. So mine never actually had that scar on his face when I bought it. I know there were some versions that did and some versions that didn't. So I just mixed a little bit of red and brown paint together, got the tiniest little paintbrush, and I just added that in myself. And I'm actually really happy with it. I think I did a pretty damn good job of that. So this was another one that when I bought it, come with that little generic blue lightsaber. And with Anakin being one of, if not the main character, that's not good enough for me. So luckily, at some point, I did buy a whole lot of just loose figures. And it just so happened that this lightsaber was in there, so problem solved. Now, it's probably not exactly the right one, but it is quite clearly Anakin's lightsaber, so that'll do me. These older figures, the hands aren't sculpted that well for holding the lightsabers, but he does hold it pretty well enough. It's not going to fall out if you shake him about. So here he is with the Phase 1 Captain Rex. And I think these two, again, work really well together. I love this Captain Rex figure. I know a lot of people prefer the Phase 2 versions that come out later on, but to me, just not really a fan of those. Although I might actually at some point swap his shoulder pauldron for the Phase 2 one, as it is just slightly more cool looking. Ah damn, might have to get some more 501st clones now. And then another more recent one that I bought is Luminara Unduli. God, some Star Wars characters have got stupid names. So I recently rewatched the Landing at Point Rain episodes of Clone Wars with her in it. Because I've now seen it so many times, I just pick episodes to watch at random. But for whatever reason, this time round, this character really stood out to me. She's another one who does nothing and says nothing. She's basically just a background character in the movies. But if you watch Clone Wars, they sort of flesh her out quite a bit. And I just thought she was quite cool, so, you know, I just decided, yep, gotta go and buy one of her. They did a really good job of capturing the animated look of this whole costume. Like, this dress looks really cool. But you know what, it got me thinking, like, how come when it comes to the male Jedi, they've all got to wear these sort of plain robes, and yet the female ones all seem to just wear whatever the hell they want? She's wearing a dress. Ahsoka's just wearing pants and a shirt. Ayla Secura's got like a crop top and jeans. What's that about? This is another head sculpt that they've done a really good job of. Like, they really took some liberties with the design of her face, and I think they captured that really well here. They are in general just better at sculpting these animated faces than they are the live action ones. I mean, obviously at this scale the paint is just a little bit sloppy, but it's actually not that bad. They even managed to get a little tattoo there on her chin. Obviously, they've done a skirt piece thing in a soft goods fabric, and that's not too bad. It sort of flares up here at the ends, which I actually think it's supposed to do, because no matter how much I wet it and flatten it down, it still just curls right back up. Now this one, I know for certain, she 100% came with the wrong lightsaber. I know her hilt has got more of a triangular thing here on the end for the pommel, and this definitely doesn't have that. In fact, I've got absolutely no idea who this actually belongs to. I do not recognise anything with that sort of ribbed hilt, and then these kind of triangular designs towards the end of the emitter. No idea. And with it not being hers, it really doesn't fit in her hands well. I'll try and show you here in the left hand first. Just falls straight out. So I've actually had to go to the lengths of adding just a tiny little bit of blue tack here in her hand, and we'll just squeeze it in like that. And fingers crossed, that's enough. It hasn't fallen out on me yet, but who knows? Let's have a look at Mace Windu next, and this is another really cool one. Let's face it, it's just a really cool line of figures, isn't it? This one in particular though, they captured the likeness of him straight up head to toe, just perfectly. It looks exactly like him, but as you can see though, the main problem I have is that they sculpted his legs in a really wide stance. So this is actually the only one I have that has to use 2 stands. Yet again though, another head sculpt that they absolutely nailed. It looks exactly like how he does in the show. And there's even certain side-on angles where I actually see Samuel L. Jackson, so I'm actually quite impressed with this. I get why the Black Series is done to look like realistic people so they all fit in together, but man, imagine these animated face sculpts at 6 inch. Bit of a weird one on this one though. He seems to be the only figure that has this weird spring-loaded gimmick action. I don't really get it. You can have him just slightly chopping wood or something. It's a weird one to me. As far as I'm aware, he's the only one in the entire line who's even got a gimmick. And of course, he comes with his purple lightsaber. It's nicely done, nicely sculpted, a really nice shade of purple. But as you can see, the silver is just completely scraping off the handle on mine. I try my best to just leave it in his hands and then never touch it, because that's only going to get worse. Next up, we'll have a look at Yoda, and as I'm sure you can see, I kinda cheated with this one. I personally am just really not a fan of the Clone Wars figure. Or maybe not even a fan of his design in general in that. Yes, obviously he's very small, but he's also really wide, and he's got the biggest edge you've ever seen. I had it in my basket on eBay and just couldn't go through with it, so I had to buy this guy instead, which I actually think is probably the best Yoda figure you can get. This is just the 5 POA Force Link one that come out with the Last Jedi figures. And look at it. That right there is the main reason I wanted this. That is such a damn good head sculpt for Yoda. Looks exactly like he did in the prequels. Obviously the paint could be slightly better, but it was a cheap figure and a tiny scale, so I'm actually really happy with that. And the other good thing about this is that they haven't really tried to just ruin all that sculpt by adding loads of different articulation that Yoda really doesn't need. You're obviously not going to have him posed flying around, swinging his lightsaber around. He's just going to be stood there. So doing it like this, the whole sculpt flows really nicely, and I think that looks really good. Accessory wise, he's got his little wooden walking stick thing. And yeah, it's nicely done enough. What more can you really want from that? It's a wooden stick. And the ball on the end fits really nicely in his hand, which is a tiny detail, but I'm really happy about that, because it just fits. It's not going to fall out dead easily, which is good, because you know that this is the first thing that you would lose. And then obviously he's got his little teeny tiny little Yoda lightsaber. The hilt's really nicely sculpted, painted well enough at this scale. What more could you want, really? The only difference with this one, and all the others, is it's not got that weird little flared bit at the end of the blade. But don't make a big difference to me, because I don't really tend to pose him holding this anyway. For me, he looks much better just standing there, leaning on his walking stick, and that's how I have him on my shelf. Next up, we've got Ahsoka, and again, it's another one that I kinda cheated with. This is actually the vintage collection version of her, because at the time that I was buying these, the animated one was weirdly really expensive. Like I'm talking like 40, 50 quid, and to me, that's way too much money to spend on this scale. It's not even worth the amount of plastic. So I decided to grab this one just as sort of a cheaper option. I think I got it for about 7 quid actually. It's really not bad either. It's basically the same figure, they've just added quite a lot more detail into the sculpt. Like, obviously Vintage Collection is supposed to look more like real life people, so the whole costume has just got all these tiny little details all over it, and they've done a damn good job of it all. Even all the way down to the legs and these little diamonds on the side. And then obviously there's this little soft goods skirt thing just to not get in the way of the articulation. That's a really nice little touch. Main problem with this one though is that head sculpt right there. In general, not a bad head sculpt to be honest, but this come out at a time before there actually even was a live action actor for Ahsoka, never mind even the younger version of her. So it's not actually based on anyone, it's just a random face. Looking at it now, it's probably actually not that bad, but it's just completely inaccurate, isn't it? They're going to have to re-release it with that younger actor's face on it. Or actually, no, don't re-release it, do a completely new one, please. I also think these sort of head tails, whatever they're called, Leku, Montrails, whatever. There's something about how they did it here. Just from the front view, it just looks like she's got some weird kind of hat on. It's not so bad from the sides. You can kind of see it a bit better there, and it's nicely painted enough. Although these blue lines don't really line up too well in the middle on the back there. But yeah, I don't really know how they could have done that better. But that's not really my job, is it? You figure out how to do it better, Hasbro. The whole belt piece is really nicely sculpted like this. It's got two little holes for you to peg in your lightsabers. And they do peg in quite nicely too. They're definitely not going to fall out. Let's have a quick look at them. You know, they do the trick. They're obviously what they're meant to be. They're painted in this nice silver paint. And then she's got her two actual lightsabers. Obviously the longer one and the shorter one. And more accurately, the shorter one has got sort of a slightly yellower green, so that's really nice. But again though, these are ones where the hilts are quite prone to all that silver just scraping off. Does my head in. I've actually gone back and repainted them both with just a little bit of silver paint, but it won't be long before that all starts scraping off again. And have a look at her hands here, right? So obviously a right hand, that looks more like it's sculpted to be holding the lightsaber, no problem there. The other one though, it's got this sort of weird fingers shape, I don't know, maybe it's supposed to be using the force or something. But it does not help holding these lightsabers. This right one again, obviously it's not too bad if you sort of squeeze that button shape into her fingers. And it's definitely not going to fall out. But this side is where I always have the problems with it, because of the shape of those fingers there. And now, of course, now it's on camera. It's not too bad, is it? It's not going to fall out. Let's try it the other way around though. Ah, you arsehole. You're going to stay in fine on camera now, aren't you? Look at that. For some reason, they're staying in now. But they don't usually. Keep that in mind, right? This is just this figure trying to make me look stupid. And then we'll bring back in Anakin and Captain Rex. And there you go. All three of these actually look really good together, despite the fact that she's not the same animated style as the other two. She could maybe do with being just slightly shorter. But to be honest, that's probably a bit nitpicky. And these figures are already tiny, they don't need to be any bloody smaller. And then last but not least, here's my favourite one, and it's the second version of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obviously if you know the first version, it's got more of the clone armour on, he's got sort of the shoulder pads, the boots, the arms, basically everything except for the helmet. And that is a really good look for him, but the figure is pretty crap. Especially the face sculpt on it, just got a big fat ginger face. Then there was another version of this done, which is better sculpted. I suppose it's probably a bit more accurate. But I don't like the face on that one either. So for me, this is the one I went for, and I'm really happy with this. Obviously, just having those clone gauntlets on the wrists, it is a lot closer to his normal Jedi costume, but I don't really care. I actually think it works really well with this. Again, as mentioned before, I can't 100% guarantee that this isn't one of those Chinese knockoffs. But if it is, they've done a pretty damn good job of it. I can't tell the difference, so I don't really care. Another really good face sculpt as well. Like I said, the later one is probably a bit more accurate, but his head is massive, so I much prefer this one. I can see his look from the show, and to be honest, I can kind of see Ewan McGregor in there too. All these little details as well, like the communicator on his wrist, or the Republic logo on the other side, or even just that tiny little silver belt buckle, all punched in really nicely, so if this did come from a Chinese factory, well done. This was another one that probably is a fake because it come with that generic blue lightsaber. Couldn't be doing with that. So I just bought a cheap Revenge of the Sith figure. Literally cost me I think about £2 just so I could steal his lightsaber. And this is really nicely done. Sculpted well, painted well. I'm glad they included the little gold bit on the end. Again, it's another one I'm pretty sure is going to end up just scraping off the hilt at some point, but for now, it's surviving pretty nicely. Another thing that I like to do with this guy, I just stole this little Jedi robe off my Return of the Jedi Luke Skywalker figure, which the robe is completely inaccurate for that one anyway, so I like to just shove it on this guy. And even though I don't really think soft glove robes work that well at this scale, I do think that this looks pretty damn cool on Obi-Wan. You can wet it and flatten it down, just sort of hold it in shape. But it's not actually that bad as it is. It just takes a little bit of faffing around with. But I think he looks pretty damn cool wearing that. And here he is with his clone commander Cody, and again I think these two work really well together. I especially actually really quite like this Cody figure. For something that's quite basic, that head sculpt underneath is really nice. I know it got reused for a lot of other clones, which meant they all had his scar over the face. Kinda stupid. But it works really well for Cody. And damn, there's another one. I think I might have to buy some more 212 clones. So yeah, even though this wasn't the scale that I was originally interested in, I actually really like this. The 6-inch ones are never going to be the animated style, so if you wanted that, this is basically your only choice. And it works pretty damn well. I'm not disappointed at all, to be honest with you, apart from maybe some of the slightly limited articulation and them not holding the lightsabers that great. But you get the same damn thing at 6-inch too. So don't forget to like this video, drop us a comment letting us know what you think, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. There'll definitely be more and more Star Wars content coming soon, especially Clone Wars, that's the majority of my collection. And until then, I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers!